Agfa Copex. It's a copy film, but is it any good for photos? I wanted to do some more film comparisons to Tri-X like I began earlier in the year. But to keep things consistent, rather than do them every now and then, I went ahead and got 49 different film stocks, everything I could get in 35mm from B&H and Freestyle. So unless they were out of stock, I got a roll of it. Now, if this part of the video seems familiar, it's because I'm using this portion of the video for all 49 of them rather than record it 49 times. So if you want to skip ahead to the H&D curves or the prints, time codes are right over here. For those of you that haven't seen this part of the video before, here's what I've done. So I wanted to use each film with the exact same shot, which is a headshot of me with a Kodak Gray Card Plus, which happens to have a red, blue, and green patch, a cyan, magenta, yellow patch, and then a dark and a neutral flesh tone. Then, with those shots taken, I bracketed every shot in third of a stop so that we can make sure we have a negative of equal shadow density to the base target film of Tri-X. Now, the reason I use Tri-X is because it's just been around for a long time and it's a very popular film. So it's a good base film to compare everything to. Then, once everything was developed, which was developed in D-76 at stock for the manufacturer's recommended time, I printed everything on Ilford using the exact same aperture, contrast settings, developer, and everything. The only thing I changed was my exposure time, and that was to make sure that I compensated for any base fog variation from one film stock to another. Other than that, everything was left the same so that we can have a comparison of just the qualities of the film. Now, there's going to be some differences in contrast, especially on the high end, and that's because the manufacturers getting their development time may not have used the same target that Kodak used for Tri-X. And that's okay. We're not looking at the overall contrast for everything. What we're really looking at is grain characteristics, tonality, how the film treats the shadows versus the highlights, that sort of thing. And we're looking at spectral sensitivity, thus the Gray Card Plus, rather than just a regular Gray Card. So we're going to go ahead and look at H&D curves, which if you saw one of my earlier videos on sensitometry, I like to use pen and paper and make my graphs. However, my wife was really ready to make sure I was done with this project. So she put everything into a spreadsheet for you all. So even though I don't like them, I want to show them to you thanks to her. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the prints side by side with the same print made from Tri-X. And from there, you can decide if you like the film and if you want to go and use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curves and then we'll go to the prints. Tri-X here in blue, Copex in red. The toe is a little bit of a slower upturn than the Tri-X, which means we may have a little less separation down in the shadows. The straight line portion in the middle is fairly extreme, so maybe a little bit higher contrast overall, and then some shouldering at the top, which means we're going to have less highlight separation. Now, the developing times for this provided by the manufacturer may be pushing the film. That could be why we have such a long flat line before the toe begins, meaning that this film may be over optimistically rated. It could be a much slower film, not much, maybe a stop slower than advertised, but as the name implies, it's probably a high contrast copy film that's being repurposed as a pictorial film. And that's probably why we have such a steep line on this film. But let's see what the actual print looks like so we can see what these differences look like beyond the chart. Here we have our Tri-X and here we have our Agfa. So clearly not a fantastic look. We didn't even achieve a white at this point. I mean, we do have a highlight, I guess, up on my nose here. Longer development time may help. It depends on whether or not we have reached the shoulder of the film. I'm really not going to investigate this film more on my own time in order to see if I can use it. Those of you that have shot it as a camera film as opposed to a copy film, I mean, you probably know you can get a white if you develop it long enough. So in this case, probably just not long enough. But we do have still some features that we can look at. For one, being a copy film, we did get quite a few shades of gray in there. Some of these high resolution copy films are really only meant for line drawings, which means you get a black, you get a white, and really nothing in between. So we did at least get some in between, quite a bit of in between. Looking at our spectral sensitivity chart, we have some very interesting results. Our blue is practically black. Our red is practically black. Our yellow is the lightest. So for some reason, we are getting quite a bit of yellow exposure. We're getting very little blue exposure. We're also getting very little red exposure. So maybe this is actually properly developed. It's just the film isn't picking up any real blue or red from the scene. Perhaps, because this is a cyan shirt, that would be this right here. It is relatively dark. And my skin is going to have quite a bit of red in it. So maybe we are right there. And we only got a third of the white as we should have, considering magenta and cyan would have made up the other 2/3 of that exposure. Who knows? It's a possibility. Green and magenta actually came out about the same. So that's a weird color response, but it is what it is. Okay, let's zoom in and look at some of the particulars and see about grain structure and all that sort of thing. Oh, and film speed for this came out to 32 to get the same shadow detail here and through this portion. So a third of a stop, no, I'm sorry, 2/3 of a stop slower than the advertised 50 speed. Okay, so there's not a whole lot to see here because it is extremely dark. We can still, however, make out the difference between the edge of my ear and the background, just barely, but it is there. If we look at some of the texture above my eyebrow, we do see some skin texture, but mostly there's really nothing to see here. So let's move on. Okay, again, here, not a whole lot to see. The grain, however, does not seem to stand out very much from the beginning. This is normally where we would be comparing grain, but we're not getting a lot. We are still, however, getting some separation between background and shoulder, but nothing yet to really show us grain or detail. So let's move on. Okay, now we can start seeing much better. This is a very, very sharp film. Very fine grain too. So in some of the others, we can get a sense of texture in the fabric of this t-shirt. In this shot, we can actually see the individual threads in the fabric itself through here that you cannot see in the other shots. So very, very fine detail. You can also pick up the hair in my neck, as lovely as it is to look at, much, much clearer and sharper. So a very fine grain, very sharp film. All right, and here in the last section, the detail in the pores of my skin and the hairs and everything really, really come out well. So I feel like if you want extremely fine, sharp detail, this is a great film to try. You're just going to have to experiment to find the right exposure time and the right developing time, because this clearly is not the right combination. So I think you can get some excellent results from this. You are going to get really weird rendition of colors, and that's from that very strange spectral chart that we saw here. But I think you can get some excellent photographs with it if you take the time to learn its idiosyncrasies. So good luck with that. I would love to see some pictures. If you do take some with this, join my Discord, post them there. I would love to see what you can come up with. All right, that's going to do it for this film. Thank you for watching. Please help support this channel either through my Patreon or my merchandise pages down in the links below. They just help me get the materials to do videos such as this, and I greatly appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.